Gay Americans are often assumed to be Democratic voters since the Democratic Party supported gay marriage and anti-discrimination laws, and many in the Republican Party do not. But in this cycle, the Democratic National Committee is actually spending money on political advertisements targeting the LGBTQ community, desperately trying to keep them in the Democratic fold. The six-figure ad buy, which appeared in publications in major cities that target the gay community, show that the left is worried that this demographic might be slipping away from Kamala Harris's grasp. With us now to unpack this and a lot more is Charles Moran, head of the Log Cabin Republicans, an organization for conservative members of the gay community, many of whom will be voting for Donald Trump. Welcome to Rising.
Thanks so much.
So talk to us about this demographic, this community. I know many people will still hear the idea of a gay Republican and say, oh, that's like self-hating or something. It'd be like a right. Black KKK member. You hear that all the time. How do you respond to those kinds of insults?
Well, given the fact that the LGBT rights movement has been one of the fastest moving civil rights movement in American history, it's no surprise that we be brought into the same melding pot that the rest of this country has. So there's obviously, been so many advances over the last several decades. We're basically on parity now. We have, obviously the right to marriage, the ability to serve in the military. In so many places you can't be fired for being gay. I mean, we've essentially achieved parity. So with that, there's been an increase in gays and lesbians who are looking at quality of life issues as the rubric for their voting more than just, are you an equality supporter or not? And that is all actually backed up in polling and in facts. Earlier this year, the Independent Center did a round of polling that showed for the first time a majority of gay and lesbian voters are actually going to cast their ballots based on issues other than gay rights, exclusively, which is a huge movement for this community because, again, for the first time ever, the gay community can't be considered single issue voters. They're going to look at things like the economy, the foreign affairs, border security, and that is a huge opportunity for Republicans to step in because on those issues, obviously Republicans are leading in the polls amongst all demographics of Americans. So for context, in 2016, only 14% of the LGBT community voted for Donald Trump. That number doubled in 2020 to 28%, probably hits the low 30s. And again, now we're seeing this polling showing that with Donald Trump starts at 28%, but there's another 14 to 16% of the gay vote that is undecided, which could potentially jack Donald Trump's appeal and voter share for the LGBT community well up into the 40s. Now, if you compare that against other demographics like African American voters, women voters, Asian American voters, Latino voters, if you look at just objectively, more than a third, nearing half of any community voting in a bipartisan fashion, that's huge. And this is something that's not being discussed enough amongst especially mainstream media, but also gay media, because they realize that they don't have a stranglehold. I mean, the African-American vote is substantially smaller for Donald Trump and Republicans. Same thing with the Latino vote, but so much more attention is being played to them. But in this situation, we actually have good data that shows that the gay vote is actually fairly split. Obviously, Democrats are still pulling from a higher level, and we all understand why. But it's not something that Democrats can take for granted. And to your point, this is why I think they're putting so much money into an ad buy directly targeting gay voters.
What role do you think Donald Trump specifically and personally has played in this? Because this was the first Republican candidate who I think we can admit comes from a more was not a religious conservative, right, social conservative type person, was clearly supportive of gay people and gay relationships earlier, before he was a Republican political figure. And I think even people who are ardently social conservative would probably admit that he still harbors those views, and he has not tried to turn the party back in a direction to not accept the decisions made by the Supreme Court and in the states about gay marriage. Right. So is it really Trump himself who helped accomplish this?
I mean, Donald Trump gets a lion's share of the credit for this. To your point, he was the first president elected in American history who, when sworn in, actually supported marriage equality. Bill Clinton did not. Barack Obama did not. So this is actually quite monumental. Also, another first for Donald Trump is in 2020, he created the first ever official LGBT coalition on a Republican presidential campaign. That same year, Log Cabin Republicans, my organization, ended up raising money and helped put on the first ever LGBT outreach campaign on behalf of a Republican presidential campaign in history. And I think that that's in part why we doubled that vote share between 2016 and 2020. But even if we look straight into 2024, look at just what recently happened in July at the Republican National Convention, where Donald Trump and the campaign single-handedly ensured that the newest approved official RNC platform stripped out all of the anti-gay language and left in place very common sense policies and some guardrails around LGBT issues. This, I think, is part of the reason why the Democratic Party are continuing to seize on the whole Project 2025 fallacy, because the new official Donald Trump RNC platform is so mainstream, it's so streamlined, it's been stripped of all the pork, of all the fat, of all of the exclusionary language for so many different communities, including mine, that, this is all the left has to grasp onto is 2025, because the official platform of the party is so current and up to speed with the needs of all Americans, including LGBT Americans. We give complete credit to that, to the leadership of the RNC and also to Donald Trump. So again, between his historical actions, I mean, as a businessman, he instituted policies of the Trump Organization that ensured domestic policy or partnership benefits before it was law in the state of New York. As a philanthropist, he talks extensively about, in the 80s, losing so many friends to HIV/AIDS. He was one of the first people to cut a six-figure check to the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation before it was popular to do HIV/AIDS fundraising. And then again, as president of the United States, having so many different policies, things like ending the spread of HIV/AIDS in 10 years, things like going to the United Nations and calling upon the leaders of the world to end the criminalization of homosexuality, reducing the bans on sexually active gay men from giving blood. I mean, appointing amazing people, folks like Ambassador Rick Grenell, people like Clark Cooper, people at the top and throughout the ranks of the government who are members of our community. He made it okay to be openly gay in the GOP, to live your life and to be a stellar employee, public servant, or political operative. So he created not only policy, but also conditions for equality in the Republican Party from top to bottom. And that is the lasting impact of Donald Trump that I'm so proud to share to the broader part of the LGBT community.
Yeah, the changes on this in recent years are pretty dramatic. I can remember back at CPAC in, I think, the late aughts, 2008, somewhere around there, a gay Republican organization, Go Proud, that was participating at CPAC, and it was a big catastrophe. There's a news cycle about it. There were a lot of some leaders of CPAC who were very unhappy about it. It got criticized by other conservatives. Then there were then people were defending them, and Ann Coulter got involved, and maybe you can recount that incident, but we've come such a long way since then.
Well, and this is the best part about where we are. I mean, I've been working professionally in politics for the better part of the last 20 years. I've seen the rapid advancement of inclusion, and this has happened, it's reflective of society. I mean, everybody has either, a coworker who's a member of the community or somebody in their family. So these issues are real now to so many more people. And again, politics flows downstream of society. As society goes, eventually, politics will go, and that will still eventually hit the Republican Party. And that's where we are today. Those wars in the 2000s and even in the early teens were the last vestiges of people who were really trying to keep this movement and the party closed off to diversity. And I think, again, Donald Trump just brought an entirely new, fresh face. Look, there's always been gay people in the Republican Party at the highest levels. But when you actually make it okay for people to be their true selves, live their authentic lives, you're going to get the best work out of people. And that, again, is Donald Trump's focus. Is just valuing on what you give, valuing you on your impact to the organization, to the company, to the world. And that is, we saw just so much movement so quickly. And as a result of that, again, we've seen this year so many disaffected Democrats and independents who are joining our movement. We created the Trump Unity Coalition to bring in not just, LGBT conservatives and Republicans and our straight allies that are equality minded, but also those independents, those disaffected Democrats, people part of the Tulsi Gabbard world, part of the RFK Jr. world. We're working hand in hand. I brought in the RFK LGBT coordinator into Log Cabin so that we're working in sync. This is an entirely new way of conducting politics. It's not top down, it's bottom up. And I think it's part of the reason why Donald Trump right now is leading in the polls and why we have there's so much joy and energy and excitement at all of these events where it's doom and gloom and chaos on the left.
Got to leave it there for now, but we're going to continue this conversation and release more of it at a future date. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you, viewers, for watching Rising today. We really appreciate it. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be back with you during vacation. I'll be back following week, not next week. You'll have Amber and others taking care of you then. See you later.